Sound check, testing, sound check, testing.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting is hereby called to order. Included in today's agenda are the following: the organizational meeting of the Committee on National Defense and Security, and a hearing to discuss the different measures pertaining to the amendments of the Human Security Act of 2007. For the information of everybody, the following are the members of this committee. This representation is the chair, vice chairpersons, Francis Tol Tolentino, Senator Grace Poe, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa, Senator Christopher Lawrence Go, Senator Gordon, Senator Pacquiao, and the members are Senator Lapid, Senator Villanueva, Senator Marcos, Senator Binay, Senator Angara, Senator Villa, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Villar, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Pangilinan, Senator De Lima. Ex-officio members are Senators Recto, Subiri, and Drilon. Now, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Vice Chair of the committee, Senator Francis Tolentino, and of course, Senator De La Rosa. Thank you, sirs, for attending this meeting and hearing. And I'd like to acknowledge, Comsec, can you acknowledge the presence of our resource persons?
Good morning. Let me acknowledge the presence of our resource persons for this hearing. We'll start with Secretary Delphine Lorenzana of the Department of National Defense, Secretary Eduardo M. Año of the Department of the Interior and Local Government, Secretary Gregorio Honasan of the Department of Information and Communications Technology, Director General Alex Paul Monteagudo from the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency, General Hermogenes Esperon Jr. from the National Security Council, General Benjamin Madrigal of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Executive Director Florentino Manalastas Jr. from the Anti-Terrorism Council Program Management Center, Commissioner Gwen Pimentel Gana from the Commission on Human Rights, Police Brigadier General Elmedio Tagra from the Philippine National Police, Deputy Director General Damian Carlos, also from the DILG, USEC Ricardo David Jr. from the DND, and Judge Felix P. Reyes from Branch 272 of RTC Marikina City. Thank you.
Thank you, Comsec. The chairman manifests that the committee is adopting and subscribing to the pertinent provisions of the Rules of the Senate, Rule 10, Section 13, Paragraph 13, Committee on National Defense and Security. We have 19 members. All matters relating to national defense and external and internal threats to national security, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, pension plans, and fringe benefits of war veterans and military retirees, citizens, army, selective service, forts, arsenals, military camps and reservations, coast, geodetic and meteorological surveys, civil defense and military research and development, and the rules of procedure governing inquiries in aid of legislation. These rules shall guide the operation and conduct of the meetings, hearings, and investigations of the committee. Do I hear a motion to adopt the rules?
I so move, Mr. Chair, that we adopt Section 5 of the Rules of the Senate for purposes of guiding the proceedings of this committee.
Second ka? Ito. Second.
I second, Mr. Chair.
There's a motion properly seconded to adopt the rules of the committee, and it is hereby adopted. Okay, we're done with the organizational meeting. We'll go to the second part of the agenda to hear the measures pending in the committee or referred to the committee to amend the Human Security Act of 2007. Now, during the last 17th Congress, the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, to which the bills related to terrorism were referred, conducted two public hearings, one on October 1, 2018, and the second on November 27. In fact, a committee report was presented on the floor 1 week before Congress went on sine die adjournment. However, due to lack of material time, the said measure was not enacted into law. During the two public hearings, the following proposals were considered and incorporated in the committee report. From the National Security Council, they proposed that the 500 peso per day, 500,000 pesos in the form of damages to the accused when acquitted should be scrapped. The reason being there are already existing laws in relation to granting compensation to falsely charged persons. Further, they also suggested that a special detention facility for terrorists, like a supermax, super maximum detention center, shall be provided by the government. And they also suggested that special courts will try violations of the anti-terrorism law. On the part of the ICT, they suggested that NTC, instead of the ICT, should be imposed with the duty to compel the telecoms and the internet service providers for the production of such pertinent data, information, or records as they, not the ICT, have the adjudicatory powers that could effectively enforce judicial orders, resolutions, or directives that would compel an individual to perform or refrain from performing an act. The Anti-Terrorism Council Program Management Center, it was agreed upon that they will retain most of their function under the same setup instead of converting themselves into a commission. Now, DFA supports the inclusion of the secretaries of DICT, DOST, DOTR, DOLE, and DepEd to the Anti-Terrorism Council, and the addition of a provision on foreign terrorist fighters, which has already been included in at least one of the bills. These and more, which were discussed and resolved during last year's public hearings, and those that we will consider in this public hearing, are being recommended by the Chair to be spread into the records of the Committee on National Defense and Security for consideration in our committee report, para lang hindi tayo paulit-ulit. At unless meron kayo mga bagong input, or maybe nagpalit yung isip ninyo from November to this day, then you can pop out. No? So who do I recognize first? Seniority? Oh, Senator Hunasan. Secretary Hunasan is recognized. About the ICT.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, may I be allowed to put on record our initial position on the proposed Senate bills to be followed by more comprehensive written submissions. First, on countering violent extremism in social media, the DICT supports the duties and responsibilities against violent extremism in social media. The DICT's policy initiative on social media use for government is aligned with the objectives of the measures countering violent extremism in preventing violent extremism, counter-radicalization, de-radicalization, and providing aftercare thereon. Second, on the expanded definition of terrorist acts, the DICT supports the Senate bill's expanded definition of terrorist acts to include acts under Republic Act 10175 or the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012 as predicate crimes with the following reservations. First, reservations on the use of Republic Act 10175. RA 10175 covers all crimes under the revised penal code and special penal laws and imposes a penalty 1 degree higher if the crime is committed by, through, and with the use of ICT technologies. This is Section 6 of RA 10175. Second, crimes under the revised penal code and special penal laws have different classifications, Mr. Chairman, such as grave, less grave, light felonies offenses under Article 9 of the revised penal code. It is submitted that not all crimes committed by, through, and with the use of ICT, though ipso facto be considered as a means of committing terrorism or terrorist acts, relevant exceptions, as we suggest, Mr. Chairman, can be made regarding light felonies, offenses, or for crimes that are not of the same class or kind as the other predicate crimes of terrorism. Dito po, Mr. Chairman, we would humbly suggest comprehensive inputs from the Department of Justice para ma-cover po ito. and of course, closer coordination among the line agencies that are primarily involved in countering in countermeasures, and of course, considering also their vulnerability to assaults like cyber attacks. Third, the DICT with the other executive departments may likewise be, ito po, we humbly suggest this also, to be designated as part of the Anti-Terror Council, which would be timely considering that RA 9372 was enacted before the DICT was created. So this is just a modification, Mr. Chairman. Second, statutorily tasked, either directly or through its bureaus and attached agencies, to implement the law, judicial orders, and court authorizations relative to ICT-related terrorist activities. And finally, statutorily empowered to exercise adjudicatory powers and impose administrative fines and penalties in relation to ICT-related terrorist activities. So, Mr. Chairman, finally, in general, the DICT supports and poses no objection to the pertinent provisions in the above-mentioned Senate bills in relation to its mandate. We will follow this up, Mr. Chairman, with more comprehensive submissions in coordination with the other agencies. Salamat po.
As a matter of fact, the committee would strongly suggest that the ICT play a more active role. After all, NTC is more regulatory. Pero on the ICT, kayo yung mas technical, may technical capability. When of course, when you deal with the telecoms and the ISPs, no, internet service providers, you'll be in a more capable position, no, to deal with them. So that is the submission, the humble submission, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I'm also happy to report to you that I am actively involved in using my smartphone.
Thank you. So, yeah, if we follow seniority, but of course, if you are willing to yield to Secretary Esperon, okay lang? Sige. Secretary June is recognized.
The esteemed committee chair and the members who are actually the vice chairpersons, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We gather today hoping for the immediate passage of the proposed amendments to the Human Security Act. First, allow me to extend our appreciation from the security sector to Senate President Soto and Senator Lacson for their efforts in expediting the process. Through their respective proposed SBN numbers 6 and 21, they have shown their commitment and initiative in combating the growing danger by terrorism in the Philippines. Let me also acknowledge, of course, the former Senator Honasan for his support and now his very strong participation in these hearings. And just to go back to his statement, may I say that there is already a resolution by the Anti-Terrorism Council for indeed the inclusion of the DICT as a member thereof. Secondly, may I point out that in less than a year, there had been 3 suicide bombing attacks in Mindanao, 2 in Sulu, and earlier 1 in Basilan. Further intelligence sources have reported that due to the collapse of the Daesh in Syria and Iraq, terrorist fighters have been returning to their countries of origin to continue their reign of terror. These events alarm us to a chilling escalation in tactics, damage, and barbarity that terrorist groups are willing to engage in just to further their extremist agenda. Evolving strategies by these terrorist groups demand that we in the security sector should be able to adjust and take the initiative in order to effectively counteract these terrorist groups. It is unfortunate to note that the current version of HSA contains loopholes and obstacles which have prevented the security sector from establishing deterrence through effective criminal prosecution against suspected terrorists. Meantime, Mr. Chairman, may I update you on the fact that the Anti-Terrorism Council has adopted the National Action Plan for Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism. That will extend our hands and operations into the 6 vulnerable sectors, namely the community, the social media, schools and madrasas, religious leaders, OFW and religious scholars, and of course, persons in jails and prisons, which are sources of future terrorists. The proposed amendments to the HSA are integral to the institutional framework that the security sector requires to thwart the spread of terrorism in the Philippines. It affords us the capabilities, effectiveness, and flexibility to address both existing and emerging threats by terrorist organizations. Additionally, the proposed bill provides for the means to counteract the wide spectrum of terrorist activities through and by involving numerous government agencies. In closing, may I call on all the other stakeholders involved in the passage of the proposed amendments to the HSA to join forces in fast-tracking the passage of the law. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretary Jun. By the way, under consideration in today's public hearing are 3 bills. Senate Bill number 6, filed by the Senate President, Senate Bill number 21, filed by this representation, and Senate Bill 630, filed by the Honorable Amy Marcos. So, Secretary Lorenzana is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Mr. Chairman, I will no longer go over my statement. I'll just go directly to the amendment that we are thinking. Only 2, Mr. Chairman. To increase the detention of probable terrorist or terrorist people from 30 to 60 days. I think 30 days yung last time. Pwede namin i-increase ng 60 days. That's only our suggestion. Pangalawa, Mr. Chairman, we would like to include the Chief Minister of the BARM in the Anti-Terrorism Council.
Say again?
The Chief Minister of the BARMM to be a member of the Anti-Terrorism.
Sit in the council.
In the council, sir.
Yeah, okay.
That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
As it is provided do sa mga measures, we increase the reglementary period of detention from the usual 36 hours to 14 days, with an option to extend it to another 15 days. Now you're asking to further increase the reglementary period from 14 to 30, further extendable to another 30 days, para 60 days. What's your reason for that? And after that, we'll hear from the Commission on Human Rights. And by the way, we also invited Judge Felix Reyes. The only conviction na nangyari sa Human Security Act sa pag-implement doon sa kanyang sala, branch 70 sa Taguig. And we want to hear from him yung input niya, kung ano yung experience niya. Of course, we could have also invited DOJ para sa sa side ng prosecutor, ano yung mga strength and weaknesses ng batas, yung Human Security Act na na-encounter nila while prosecuting. But I think it would suffice that we hear from Judge Reyes. So, okay, please enlighten us. Bakit
Mr.
kailangan
Chairman.
60 days?
I think simply we would like to give the law enforcement agencies enough time to develop their case. I think sometimes 30 days is not enough, considering that it's very difficult also to develop cases. Anyway, 60 days, that's only quick. 2 months lang po yun, Mr. Chairman. Just to give them time, more time to develop the case.
May we hear from Commissioner Gwen? What say you?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and good morning to Senators Tolentino and Senator Bato. Mr. Chair, like Secretary Unasan, I would like to read a short statement, but subject to submission of a longer paper. But I will answer later on the proposal of Secretary Lorenzana. Can I proceed, Mr. Chair?
Please proceed.
Thank you. The Commission on Human Rights recognizes that it is the state's duty to protect the lives of all Filipinos against threats of life, liberty, and security. The enactment of measures that addresses such situations is within the government's powers and is assumed to be for the benefit of all. Republic Act 9372, also known as the Human Security Act, and its proposed amendments, while seen to safeguard the country against terrorism, however, also raises grave concerns on how certain provisions might contravene existing laws and infringe on our constitutionally protected rights. The Commission expresses its reservation on several provisions of the proposed measures, particularly one, on the overly broad definition of terrorism, which includes any of the acts committed against any person or entity, which makes it difficult to distinguish terrorism from ordinary crimes that are already sanctioned by the revised penal code or special laws. Number two, the inclusion of glorification of terrorism as punishable act that might lead to breaches of the right of expression or speech. Number three, the increase of the period of detention from 3 days to 14 days or 30 days without a valid warrant of arrest, which violates one's constitutional right to be presumed innocent and the right to liberty. So that's our position regarding the matter, Mr. Chair. And number four, the repeal of certain safeguards in the present law, like sections 56 and 62. In the end, the challenge for the government is to find balance between upholding national security and the respect of human rights. It is important for the state to equally improve its intelligence gathering and investigation capacity for a more targeted pursuit of terrorists and other fear-mongers whose interests solely lie in hurting the Filipino people. Our call is to continue forging stronger foundations for security and sovereignty, as well as for human dignity and rights. We should not be made to choose between safety and human rights. We welcome, therefore, the consultation, study, and debate being conducted by the committee under your mantleship, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Pimentel. Gana. Senator Tolentino is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nagpaalam ako kasi aalis ako mamaya. I'd like to focus my attention to two provisions contained in Senator Lacson's bill as well as Senator Soto's bill. And this is very timely because it refers likewise to the agenda heard by the Senator Bato's committee last week. And I'd like to refer this to Secretary Anyo. Found in sections 4 and 5 of Senator Soto's bill is an aspect related to recruitment to terrorist organizations. And this is likewise present in Section 9 of Senator Lacson's bill, recruitment to and membership in a terrorist organization. Siguro po this will be very timely considering that Senator De La Rosa will have another hearing tomorrow concerning the recruitment being done, this is current, in various universities, state universities, by certain groups allied with leftist organizations and Commission on Human Rights is listening. May we request from Secretary Anyo just a short position paper relative to the recruitment process. Kasi po, ang involved dito, kabataan. Ang nagre-recruit din, kabataan. We're not talking here of the lowering the age of criminal responsibility. So para mas maliwanag po itong, I heard madrasa kanina, para mas maliwanag po itong Section 9 at Section 4, ano po ang pananaw dito ng DILG? Lalong-lalo na, pasalamat po ako, sinuportahan nyo yung call ko na pumasok ang ating kapulisan sa mga eskwelahan para magpatrol. Ito po yung sinabi ko nung last committee hearing, wherein I even asked an apology from the PUP doon sa mga magulang. At nag-apologize sila, and I'm asking for an apology likewise from the Board of Regents. And I also asked them for a position paper relative to their support to the revival of the ROTC law. So sa pananaw po ba ng DILG, itong recruitment process ang magiging liable po dito, yung kabataan din o yung the organization itself, considering yung sa hearing, pinagsama ko na yung hearing ng isang araw wherein Senator Lacson was present, wherein the recruiters are also of minor age. So siguro mas maganda pong, mas mainam po rito, mapadalhan kami ng position paper ng DILG relative to Section 4 and 5 and Section 9 para ma-guide po yung committee. Alin po yung magiging liable po dito, yung organisasyon o yung mga kabataang nag-recruit ng mga kabataan din para sumapi sa kanilang organisasyon. Secretary Anyo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the DALG, of course, it would be better if both the recruiter and the organizations are held liable and accountable. But the problem now in our present situation, there is no law that outlaws the organization. When the RA 1700 or the Anti-Terrorism Act was repealed, the Communist Party of the Philippines is no longer an illegal organization. Whereas in that act, the Communist Party of the Philippines...
Secretary Anyo,
yes.
so you're implying that part of your proposed amendments to the Senator Soto and Senator Lacson bills would be to include the revival of the anti-subversion law and to name the organizations that should be considered illegal per se, Secretary Anyo.
Yes, Honor, Mr. Chair.
Can that be part of your position paper as well?
Yes, we're going to submit our position paper for the restoration of the RA 1700 or any similar enactment of law that would actually implement the purpose of the anti-subversion law. In the United States, the Communist Control Act of 1954 has never been repealed. That's why it's very hard for a subversive organization, particularly a communist organization, to thrive in the United States, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. It is the chair's humble submission that it should fall on the provision on proscription of terrorist organizations. Kasi sa ngayon, kung nagre-recruit yung organizations, what we call the front organizations of the CPP-NPA, no? Ito yung mga legal fronts eh. We cannot hold them liable eh, because guaranteed under the Constitution, pwede sila nang mag-enjoy ng freedom of assembly, di ba? Kasi ginagamit lang sila sa pang-rally. But it is a different matter kasi there's an ongoing case filed by the security sector. I think the DOJ filed a case ng proscription, di ba, against the NPA as a terrorist organization. What I cannot understand, kung nagpapile tayo ng kaso ng proscription, bakit kailangan i-identify pa natin yung individual members that would be included? Kasi these are nameless and faceless people. So, ang ibig sabihin ba, kung sino lang yung nakalista as members of that terrorist organization or terrorist group about to be proscribed, no? As a terrorist group, tag as a terrorist group, yun lang ang pwedeng arrestuin without warrant because the others, we go through the usual judicial process. And I would like to ask the opinion of of Judge Felix, the Honorable Judge Felix, in this regard. Kasi sa ngayon, narinig ko, I just read in the papers that the court, the RTC, na nag-hear ng proscription case, is asking for specific names of individuals na pwedeng include do sa terrorist organization. Pero ang sinisik natin to be proscribed is the NPA itself. E ang dami naman dyan na talagang alam nating NPA using aliases, di ba? And these are nameless, faceless, yet to be identified members of the NPA. Nakikilala lang natin through intelligence reports and pag may mga encounters, minahuli through interrogations, di ba, in investigation. So, unless you'd like to say something, after you will recognize Judge Felix. Judge.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to provide an update to the chair. We had a meeting with the DOJ representative, the prosecutor, 2 weeks ago about this proscription against the CPP, NPA. And the prosecutor explained that...
Ang pinapaprescribe not only the NPA, CPP, NPA?
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
Okay.
And we actually started with 600 names, and then it went down to 18, and now it's only...
Hindi kasama NDF?
No,
Kasi
sir.
They always go together, CPP, NPA, NDF.
Yes, sir. That's the one of the issues that we also raised with DOJ. But it is related to the declaration of the president, only the CPP-NPA was declared as a terrorist organization. The prosecutor explained that the number of personalities in the filing for the proscription was reduced, and eventually, I think only 2 names were left. For the reason that he said that these are the only 2 that we only need at least 2 names because it's the organization that will be proscribed. So if we have too many names, it will take longer time because for each individual, we will have to prove the case for each individual. But once the case is per individual is presented, then they represent the organization. It's the organization that will be proscribed, and all members of that organization will be considered as terrorists. The more names, the more difficult, the longer it will take for the prosecution to present his case. That's the explanation of the prosecutor, and that's also the advice.
So the implication is that the objective in including all members of the proscribed terrorist organization kasama, automatic.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Kaya lang dalawang sinama para hindi na yung napakaraming tinatakil sa court procedure.
Yes, sir.
Process.
Just for the process of the
Yeah.
proscription, sir.
Okay.
Although
Thank
the
you.
names are.
Thank you for
yes, sir.
clarifying. Judge, may we hear from you?
Good morning po. Regarding the earlier statement of Senator Tolentino about the recruitment under Section 4 and 5 of the version of the Senate President, and then Section 9, it explicitly provided here that the recruitment should be to a terrorist organization. And I think the terrorist organization that is being referred to here is the terrorist organization prescribed under Section 17 of the Human Security Act. And as far as I know, it was only the ASG, which has been prescribed by one RTC in Mindanao. And this is the first time that I came to know about was it filed already po, about the prescription of the CPP-NPA. Saan po? Sa RTC in Mindanao din po ba? Or in Manila? So I will check, Mr. Chair. And also regarding the requirement that the names of the members should be identified in the petition, I will check it, and if there's a problem, I will report it to the Office of the Court Administrator.
Thank you, Judge. May we also hear your comments on the provisions of the Human Security Act that is being sought to be amended? Ano ba yung nakita niyong mga weaknesses do sa Human Security Act of 2007? I'm glad that there's a test case kasi walang security officials na gusto mag-file ng violation ng Human Security Act. They'd rather file robbery, murder, and other crimes kasi walang 500,000 pesos na damages per day. So ano po ba yung nakita niyo mga weaknesses and also the strength of the Human Security Act of 2007?
Good po, Mr. Chair, I just would like to share my experience in handling this case against a rebel who put up a training camp somewhere in Mindanao. Actually, I was detailed in one of the branches in Taguig, and you all know of the change of venue because the original plan was to conduct the hearing in Cagayan de Oro and detained the rebels in Camp Evangelista. But I understand that then SOJ Aguirre was not satisfied with the security detail in Camp Evangelista. And there were also no judges who are willing to handle the cases in Cagayan de Oro City, maybe because of the proximity to Marawi City. So the Supreme Court and Bank decided to transfer, because I think it was the rebel who were earlier transferred to Cambagon Diwa. So it was the decision of the NBank for the RTC judges to handle the case because we are conducting our hearing in the camp, inside the camp. So I think that is also one aspect that the committee should look into about the change of venue, because every time that the rebels are detained in Camp Bagundiwa, it usually the Taguig judges. So the Taguig judges are already complaining. So if I may suggest, I had the chance to have a study tour in counterterrorism in Australia together with Justice Peralta, and we visited a detention, yes, and they have a facility wherein there is no need to transfer the terrorists. They have two booths wherein the terrorist can just sit down on that booth. He can view what's happening in the courtroom, and people in the courtroom can also view him, especially if he testify. And another booth is for the privacy in communication with the terrorist and his counsel. Well, I understand that last June, there was already, upon the request of the jail warden in Davao, there was already a pilot project in this remote testimony. I think it is being done already by the Supreme Court. Now, with respect to this case that I handle, Your Honor, I do not know that this was the first conviction under the Human Security Act. Well, here there were 4 accused who were charged with the predicate crime of rebellion in relation to Section 3 of the Human Security Act. Well, normally, the prosecution should have established the elements of the predicate crime of rebellion. Luckily, in my case, I just only took judicial notice of the Supreme Court ruling in the case of Lagman, wherein it sustained the approval of both houses in the proclamation of martial law. And in the decision of the Supreme Court, it was already mentioned of the existence of rebellion. So that's a good thing. But were it not for that case, well, I go into the detail of the presentation of the prosecution to prove the elements of rebellion, which is not easy. So what I determine only is the participation of this accused. So it was established by I think Army Sergeant, who was able to infiltrate the group. So with that, Your Honor, I convicted the accused. So
Judge, what you're telling us is you actually convicted the accused for the crime of rebellion, not for violation of the Human Security Act, because you convicted him for the crime of rebellion in relation to the Human Security Act. Ganun po ba yun, Judge?
Opo, but in my dispositive portion, I mentioned that I convicted him for terrorism. If I may read it.
Judge, ganito, sa proposal namin, we are already removing the predicate crimes kasi mahirap pong mag-convict o mag-prosecute ng kaso na nagbe-base tayo lagi sa predicate crimes. So at least in my bill, in my proposed legislation, inalis na po namin yung predicate crimes. Basta terrorist act is a terrorist act.
Opo, kasi po under the present Human Security Act, you should have to prove the elements of the predicate crime. And then if the charge was in relation to Human Security Act, so it should also be established that the acts in committing the predicate crime should be is it sowing or creating a condition of widespread and extraordinary fear. But if all the elements of the predicate crime, we're not satisfied, even if the acts in committing that predicate crime sowed or created condition of this terrorism, we cannot convict him for terrorism.
Judge, the chair acknowledges the presence of the Senate President. He is the principal author of this measure. Kaya pag naipasa to, sotolo na naman. Sige. Yes, Alex, would you like to say something?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm sure. So, Chairman, just like to thank the chair for this hearing. Uh, the the bill that is being passed, would like, instead of citing our recommendations, Mr. Chairman, I would like to mention instead the problems that the law should respond to. For instance, Mr. Chairman, this has been addressed, I think, in some of the provisions. What do we do to a Filipino who joined the ISIS abroad and is planning to come back here? I think we included in our recommendation measures such as cancellation of passports so that we have control, and he should be held liable under our law. Because otherwise, even if he commits terrorism abroad and comes back here, and if he's not held liable, then he can spread his ideology and even train Filipinos to commit terrorism. So the law should answer the question. What do we do with children who are aged below?
Excuse me, Alex, how can we hold him criminally liable for an act committed outside the jurisdiction of the country?
That's we recommended, sir, that any Filipino who expresses support to a terrorist organization, a proscribed terrorist organization by the United Nations, should also be liable under our laws. So meaning, even if you're abroad and you express or support or commit or acts which is in support of a terrorist organization, then we should hold them liable here. That is our recommendation, Mr. Chairman, because we have Filipinos abroad.
Judge, kindly educate us. Ang problema ko lang, kasi I'll be sponsoring this measure, problema ko lang, if I'm asked, yung issue ng jurisdiction. Because if he committed acts of terrorism, say in Syria, and then he comes back to the country, how can we hold him liable for acts committed in a jurisdiction outside the country?
Actually po, when I attended the counterterrorism subject in Malta, that was also one of the subject, because there were a lot of different nationals that were arrested in Syria with respect to the other European countries, because and the Syrian government, of course, cannot prosecute all of them. So I understand that nationals of some countries in Europe, so they were turned over to the country. So I just do not know what will be if there will be Filipino who were caught during, and then I do not know whether there was a United Nations provision on that, because I also understand that there were countries who refused. So but of course, if Mr. Chair, if you will ask on the jurisdiction, it should always be at the place where the crime is committed, except only yung under Section 2 of Revised Penal Code, yung extraterritorial jurisdiction.
The chair acknowledges the presence of Senator Bongo. I'm not against your suggestion. In fact, I want to support it. But I want it legally defensible. No? Pag umabot Supreme Court, thinking ahead, baka dyan ma-technical, knockout. Because ang basic question is, how can you prosecute somebody who committed a crime outside the country, outside of our jurisdiction? Yun lang naman ang concern ko. So, probably we can couch it in a language na legally defensible kung aabot man sa Supreme Court. But I'm in full support of your proposal, as a matter of fact.
Mr. Chairman, one of the proposals we submitted was that a Filipino who, with that technology now, can post in his Facebook or social media account support for, say, the ISIS or the Abu Sayyaf or the Bauta group. So if he posts of support, he's a Filipino, but he is outside of the country, and he sends money or whatever support to a terrorist organization here. That is why we are proposing for a law, so that it will become a crime. Because otherwise, I could be abroad, I could be sending money, I could be promoting the ISIS ideology, I could be spreading the ideology to fellow Filipinos, to children here through the internet, and I will not be held liable. Then we will not be able to stop the problem of the spread of the ideology and the support to these
Yeah, agreed. But
organizations.
paano kung hindi ganun ang situation? No? He went there covertly, no, on a legal visa, passport. Pagdating doon, he joined a terrorist group.
Yes,
Wala
sir.
naman siyang pinopost sa Facebook. Wala naman siyang
Yes, sir,
in-express na sentiment in support of the terrorists. Can we still go after him when he comes back? Knowing that he joined a terrorist organization, say, in Syria.
Sir, the Australia, for instance, sir, if I may just cite a country, even ang tawag mo, sir, remove the citizenship of their citizens, cancel their passports of their citizens who are supporting terrorists. In that manner, they do not just prevent them from traveling back, control them from traveling back to their country. At the same time, they prevent this individual from moving to other countries because the passport is already canceled. And therefore, they not only help themselves, but they help the international community.
Yeah, but that's administrative, no?
Yeah, that's
Hindi
it.
to
Yes, sir.
judicial.
Yes, sir.
I'm referring to, because we're
The prosecution.
tackling a piece of legislation, so we're taking judicial dito, di ba? Legal
Yes,
eh.
sir. Yes, sir.
Yun, administrative, of course, yung DFA can always cancel the passport eh. Walang
We will-
problema doon. So he cannot travel anymore.
Yes, sir.
Pero yung the aspect of holding him criminally liable for an act committed in another jurisdiction, that's the point that I'm
Yes,
raising.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And as I said earlier, suportado ko naman yung suggestion, only kailangan hindi tayo magbabiolate din ng Constitution
Yes,
or kung ano yung...
We will do research.
Yeah,
sir,
please.
And we will submit our position, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
well,
Yes, Judge.
I think, Mr. Chair, under the principle of continuing crime, so if a Filipino individual committed an act of terrorism in other country and then he went home, well, I think terrorism is not only purely action, it's also in the mind. So by virtue of a continuing crime, so meaning, so he is here, his presence is
Inimical
that's a,
to security.
Judge, right now, the only continuing crime based on jurisprudence is rebellion, di po ba? Kasi nagkaroon ng Supreme Court ruling. Pero can we incorporate in the measure the nature of terrorist or the nature of continuing crime on terrorism? Pwede ba yun?
I think so. I think, well, according to Attorney Gwen,
Para lang ma-strengthen yung position ng security
or we can
officials.
possibly, as suggested by Attorney,
Yes.
the concept of extraterritoriality in the anti-human trafficking. So,
Yes, Secretary Anyo.
Sir, what about the principle of conspiracy? If a terrorist is outside the country and he has also a conspirator inside the country, it so happened that he has the chance to do his act in
Conspiracy.
that particular part of the earth, then maybe we can invoke.
Yeah, that's already provided, yung conspiracy, di ba, to commit terrorism.
Yes, sir.
Ang inisip ko, mas matibay yung position ninyo kung ipasok natin as a continuing crime, yung crime of terrorism. Kasi kasi nabasa ko po dyan yung jurisprudence dito eh. Yung 14 days na after the commission of the crime, yung Supreme Court held na legal pa rin yung arrest at saka legal pa rin yung detention because of its nature, of the nature of rebellion being a continuing crime. I think it's a Muntinlupa case eh. Yung kasi 'di ba dapat yung sa bagong rules immediately, yung, di ba, in the act of committing, about to commit, immediately after committing, tapos in the presence or with personal knowledge. Masyadong napakahirap yung provision, hirap na hirap yung mga pulis natin sa pag-aresto because of that amendment. I think this was amended in 1985 because prior to that, when we were still in the service, hindi pa gumag-graduate si Senator Bato, ang tinitingnan lang namin reasonable ground to believe that the person has in fact committed the crime and we could already effect the arrest. But in 1985, I think this was through the intervention of the late Senator Rocco, na iba yung rule. Sinabi doon, ang pinakamabigat yung personal knowledge because yung has just been committed, pwede pang interpret yun in such a way na has just been committed after 3 days, di ba? Yung sa Rule 114. Na iba eh.
Okay, Mr. Chair, okay. Baka po mas maganda if we will apply this extraterritoriality principle under the Human Security Act. This is extraterritoriality principle and international legal cooperation rather than the principle of the continuing offense.
Mr. Chair, it's already in the anti-trafficking expanded law, so maybe we can apply that there. And maybe also a suggestion would be, since it's going to be a whole country approach, in terms of entering into multilateral agreements with countries, so it's easier for us to be able to extradite these people or convict them.
Well, yung extraterritoriality principle nag-a-apply sa different jurisdictions. What I'm trying to point out, yung nandito within the country, pero helpless yung security officials, the policemen, dahil matagal na na-commit yung act of terrorism. Kaya I'm trying to find a way na maisama yung terrorism as a continuing crime. Instead of relying on jurisprudence, isama na namin sa legislation. Parang sa gano'n, maski yung terrorism was committed a year ago, it's still a continuing crime. They can still effect the arrest. Yun po yung point ko. Kasi yung extraterritoriality applies to different jurisdictions. But in this case, I'm looking at the period from the time the crime was committed up to the time of the arrest. Hindi kami mako-question diyan kung isama namin yung terrorism as a continuing crime as long as it is legislated.
Pwede naman po. Or kaya naman po, even if the terrorist act was committed a year ago, pero siguro po, under the principle of conspiracy, as co-conspirator, so he will not be charged for what he committed a year ago, but as co-conspirator under the proposed provision in the...
Yeah. May we hear from the Executive Director of the ATC?
Mr. Chair, assuming that all other are applicable, we may not worry about the prescriptive period because since this is a grave offense, it will prescribe for a long time, probably more than 20 years probably. So we could still, but within that time, act and be able to prosecute the offender.
I'm not even thinking of the prescriptive period, kasi capital offense, 20 years talaga yan. Ang tinitingnan ko, yung pag-aresto nila, pwede sila mag-arrest even after 2 months, 3 months of the commission of the crime. Kaya gusto ko maisama yung terrorism or violation of the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2019, yung continuing crime. Mas magaang sa inyo yun, di ba? Saan ba yung police dito? Ito. Yes. What do you say?
Sir, may I just input? I think I suggest that this could be put in an exception, sir, to the rule of territoriality, sir, with regards to the terrorism committed in other countries. We are dealing on international terrorism, so maybe he could, the suspect should be charged to protect our interests, sir, as a country, sir.
These are two different things. Yung reglementary period, yun yung period of detention. Ang sinasabi ko, yung pag-aresto, even after the crime was committed, long time ago. Yun ang point kong nire-raise. So, well, this will be a contentious issue. Yung issue ng reglementary period. I'm sure many of my colleagues will question this, yung 14 days continuous detention without filing a case or without referring it to the prosecutor. Medyo mahaba-habang debate yun. And we must really justify why we should continuously detain an arrested person for a period of 14 days without filing a case against that person. In Australia, because we had dinner with the Australian ambassador and Ambassador Foley, yung counter-terrorism expert nila, hindi binibilang yung visitation ng lawyer. Kinakat nila yung reglementary period pagka lawyer yung kausap. Nagre-resume lang yung count. I think 4 hours ba yung kanila initial? 4 hours. And then after that, they will ask for judicial authorization to extend it to 14 days. Di ba? Yun ang kanila. Pero pag bumisita abogado, hindi binibilang do sa count, binabawas nila. No, but if we succeed in, in including the 14-day reglementary period, we're okay. Because during the last hearing, sabi ninyo, ito yung period na you can get vital information. No? I don't know what kind of technique you will use in extracting information, pero ito yung sabi nyo na yung 2 weeks is enough para to get all the evidence that you need and all the information to conduct follow-up. Senator De La Rosa is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I suggest that the security community should refer to the administrators of the Guantanamo Bay. How did they do that? Why until now they are not charged? Anong rason? Bakit? Guantanamo Bay, sir. They detained them for a very long time. And yet, wala naman nangyari. Hindi pa sila kinasuhan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sir, I think the Guantanamo Bay and the extension recommended by the SND is not just to gather evidence, but primarily to prevent the commission of a crime. Because if they are released, they will pose a security threat to the public, and therefore the safety and the security of the public supersedes the detention of the suspected terrorist. Because terrorists are extremists. They cannot be de-radicalized in 14 days. They have committed themselves to die for a cause like suicide bombing. We have already had 3 incidents of suicide bombing over a period of 18 months. Almost every 6 months, we had 1 incident. We pray that there will be none will follow, but we are sure that there will be, because even now, sir, Mr. Chairman, the terrorists are training and recruiting children as young as 10, 12 years old. And if we are not able to address this, the terrorists and their radicalization and having the power to detain, for instance, those just radicalizing children, then they will continue to radicalize children, just like the case of the LFS missing children. Whose fault will it be if we fail to protect our children? Our future are our children. We need to protect them from these extremist radical teachings. And terrorists have to be detained, because if you let them loose, they are going to infect the rest of the society. They're going to radicalize children, and therefore we need laws that will allow us to hold them longer, or the prerogative to even extend that period, just like in Singapore, that they can almost indefinitely hold individuals suspected to be terrorists, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, the DICT department will always subordinate itself to the competent lead of the other departments. So what we tried to do was to simplify our approach to this. We looked at the three proposed bills, and this is just a view which I humbly put on the table of the committee, for your better judgment. Even by looking at the title, are we penalizing the person or the act? So is it the terrorist or terrorism as an act? It took us some time to come up with a universal definition of terrorism. So it indicates to all of us, especially the committee, the challenge before us. Second po, we might have to coordinate to make our definition of terrorism compatible with the definition of other countries, because my understanding is terrorism is a universal crime. You bomb and you come up with a demand, or you coerce any government that cuts across the political, economic landscape. It might also partly address the issue of extraterritoriality. Now, Mr. Chairman, as a last point, even from a purely information, communications, and technology approach, hindi ho ba information now is the new oil? It's a resource. So ang approach po namin, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the committee, is you protect what you have, you protect the transmission, and you protect the recipient. How you use that information will define where you are in the political, ideological, economic, and social landscape. You use that information to bomb a mall, you are a terrorist by any language. So, Mr. Chairman, we submit this to the better wisdom of the committee, because indeed this will require a lot of effort to address the intent of the proposed bills. Salamat po.
Thank you, Secretary Masan. Actually, our definition, at least in our version, is called from several definitions from other jurisdictions. Pinagsama-sama, we consolidated, and most of them are similar naman in most aspects. So we came up with our own definition of a terrorist act or terrorism based on what we gathered from the definitions of other jurisdictions like Australia, United States, France, Singapore, marami, even during international conventions. And most of this input also came from the security officials. So pinaghalo-halo namin.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, if I may add. Actually, that's the starting point, and I have listened to the comments. The observation is we have one of the weakest anti-terrorism laws. So that should be our reasonable starting point. Now, if we go after, well, I was discussing this with Secretary Anyo earlier, I have yet to see somebody who is in the official roster of troops of any organization. The tendency is to straddle both the legal and the system out. In fact, it has impacted even on the appointment, if you remember, Mr. Chairman, of certain nominees for cabinet positions. Because if you remember, nag-uusap tayo. The peace talks, I understand, is not yet dead. No? So, nag-uusap tayo, bakit tuloy naman ang atake ninyo? So, ang sagot sa atin is we have no control That gives us an indication of pressure. So if you have no control, why do you not condemn this publicly? Walang sagot. That's how it was resolved. So my point, Mr. Chairman, is that is the reasonable starting point. Last point po, before I... Ang approach po ng department, as I said, we are subordinating ourselves to the better judgment and wisdom, no? Is yung, let's say, cyber attack lang po. A month ago, we had a series of cyber attacks. Pero kayang-kaya nating sanggahin yun eh. Ang problema natin, pag may na-recruit sa loob at binuksan yung pinto, yun po ang medyo complicated. So that should be our focus if we are going to adopt a proactive stance in this regard. Thank you po.
I may have to disagree with you that ours is one of the weakest. It is the weakest, actually.
Mr. Chairman. Sir.
Yes, Chief of Staff.
Sir, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My comment pertains to the proposal to transform the Anti-Terrorism Council to a commission. We understand, of course, that the agencies and officers that are supposed to be included in this whole of nation anti-terrorism strategy are subsumed under different departments, like, of course, Bureau of Immigration, under Department of Justice, Customs, under the Department of Finance. Now, the problem that we have encountered, sir, especially during the Marawi campaign, sir, is the need to have offices or units, a sort of clearinghouse at the regional or at the tactical level, sir, to decide on matters that need urgent action. Like in the case during the Marawi campaign, sir, I was the one in charge, of course, in the area of Misamis Oriental, where Laguindingan is located. We have had instances of foreign nationals coming out of Lanao and about to board aircrafts. But we do not have a Bureau of Immigration official in Laguindingan because it is not an international airport. And we have a hard time, of course, identifying persons or officials to decide on whether we will be able to hold this individual for further questioning. But because of it's about to board the aircraft, as to who will take charge or who will be, if ever we need to repay or pay for the airfare, if ever it will be detained for a period of time, cannot be decided by, because it takes time to coordinate with at the national level, sir. So we support, sir, that to give more or to provide downline, sir, for the Anti-Terrorism Council at the regional or tactical level para meron tayong clearinghouse, sir, or ibig sabihin yung isang office or unit to decide on terrorism issues encountered by law enforcement agencies, sir.
Before I recognize Senator Go, may we hear from the ATC, your view?
Mr. Chair, we have an existing mechanism, the RAT-CCG, which has been functioning in the past. However, because of present developments, it has not been convened. However, we could reconvene that. We have also a license desk comprising representatives of various agencies where we could meet, discuss matter, and decide. And then our recommendation to be provided to the Anti-Terrorism Council through the Council Secretariat. So that mechanism is already covered. We just have to again reactivate that and then function as such so that we will be more effective. The good thing is now we have existing already lead agencies to handle each and every program of the council. So we could utilize the structure and then on our office we could give technical assistance and of course our capability to coordinate with other agencies because we are acting in behalf of the council.
Mr. Chairman, may I add?
Yes.
May I add to,
Yes, Alex.
to the ATC? As the Secretariat of the ATC, I would like to inform the Chair that the the NSA and the NICA support the function of the ATC are establishing an information hub where we can address the concerns of the different agencies involved in terrorism. Information is key to fighting terrorism, the sharing of information, access to information. And the NSA, the NSC is setting up this system to provide information to the different agencies, including the Bureau of Immigration, the NBI, members of the National Intelligence Council, which is chaired by the NICA. We are hoping that in a few months this will be operational. We have tested this, Mr. Chairman, and even now there is an ongoing seminar for the full implementation of the project. Aside from that, the ATC as a council, I believe, Mr. Chair, is more appropriate in addressing terrorism because the members are the members of the security sector, SMD, NSA, AFP, PNP, DOJ, and DFA, NBI, and they are the agencies who are concerned. And therefore, being a council, they can easily pass resolutions or amend resolutions, issue policies that will be observed by the different agencies. One of the most recent one, as a concern of the Chief of Staff, is on foreigners, and we passed a resolution where foreigners, for instance, it used to be, Mr. Chairman, that foreigners who are arrested as suspects or rescued as after a terrorist incident are taken custody by embassies immediately. So the government can no longer investigate or interrogate or conduct the investigation. But now, under ATC resolution, no embassy is allowed to intervene unless cleared by the council. So the security forces can detain him through the Bureau of Immigration for as long as they want, if they are foreigners, so that the ends of justice will be served. These measures right now, sir, the ATC is more active in addressing all of these, as mentioned by the PMC. And I think the council will be able to respond more easily, considering that terrorism is a changing, morphing enemy. It transforms from one form to another, and if we are too rigid in our structure and in our policies, we will not be easily respond to changes about the threat of terrorism, Mr. Chair.
Senator Go is recognized. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to excuse myself kasi dadaan pa po ako sa public services hearing. Allow me to make a short statement before I leave. Sir Secretary Onasan, palit mo na tayo ng pwesto dito kaya puro na dito mga parati ko nakasama. I fully support the amendments of the Human Security Act introduced by Senators Lacson, Soto, and Marcos. Dapat mas padaliin natin ang paghuli ng mga law enforcers sa mga terorista. Dapat i-address natin ang mga loopholes ng current Human Security Act. Tulad ng itong 500,000 pesos per day penalty sa mga false prosecution ng law enforcers. Define ng maayos ang terrorist acts. Dapat masali rin po yung mga gumagamit ng social media para sa terorismo. At pag-aralan ng mabuti ng mga ahensya ng gobyerno po itong anyway, alam naman natin, kasama naman tayo noon, kasama tayo para labanan itong it's been 3 years na natin nilalabanan itong terorista. So, suportado ko po kayo dito. Maraming salamat, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Go. I would just like, yes, you would like to say something.
Mr. Chair, I just like to inform the body that as practiced by other countries, I think the very basic question that we have to answer is, for the terrorists, is what makes them do what they do. First, they must have ideology, and then doctrine ideology, and finding the right condition for the ideology or to flourish. And this should be addressed by pursuing a program, a robust program, to prevent the spread and development of violent extremism. And from prevention, we must be able to, by prevention, we have to develop soft approaches. That's why, and the whole of country, whole of nation approach, that's why the council members are included and they are, I think, should make the necessary program in order to prevent and terrorism, and then counter terrorism from to address if the terrorist has morphed from the state of mind to the actual action, to the actual action. The problem, Mr. Chairman, is this needs 24/7 program of the government for PCVE, and likewise, and most importantly, if it is transformed from covert to overt action. That's why the need for a regular committee or agency that will orchestrate the efforts of the different agencies in overseeing, monitoring the different facets of counterterrorism, I think is very much needed. The information, with the invention of the internet and the World Wide Web, the virus for terrorism, both from the left and the right, I think is fast spreading, and there must be some ingenious and creative ways to address this menace. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I just hope that we will not experience another Marawi siege or another cathedral bombing or another suicide bombing in Indanan ba yun? Yung Filipino. No, we never experienced this before. That a Filipino suicide bomber, hindi natin na-imagine to before, di ba? If ever magkaroon suicide bombing mission, it would be by a foreigner. But of late, how many Filipino suicide bombers have we experienced already? Isa pa lang yung sa Indanan. Yeah. And times have changed. Yung radicalism, extremism, andito na right in our shores. So I hope we won't experience another suicide bombing before we wake up to the reality. Now we really need a strong anti-terrorism law, no, in our country. So, go ahead. Want to add something? Yes, Judge.
I may also contribute. The Global Counterterrorism Forum, Your Honor, I think they have this Rabat-Washington good practices on the prevention, detection, intervention, and response to homegrown terrorism. So I just do not know whether this will be the function of the council, because especially the intervention. For example, I noticed that my son, who I heard has been recruited by a Abu Sayyaf group, and I noticed that he's been radicalized already. So what will I do to? Of course, I do not want to surrender my son to the authorities for him to be charged. I want him to de-radicalize. So is it the function of the council?
Yes, who wants to respond?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. With the with acceptance and approval of the National Action Plan for countering violent extremism, we've included that in our program. That is the different agencies who are members of the ATC must come up with their own program for radicalization of what we call the vulnerable sectors, like those OFWs who are youth, those who are incarcerated are detained in Philippine in jail system, and students of Madaris, and all these sectors that are we have identified to be vulnerable for recruitment. From prevention to deradicalization, that's the whole program of the National Action Plan, which needs to be institutionalized through the programs by the different members of the Anti-Terrorism Council.
Chairman, may I add, the NAP PCB, or National Action Plan for Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism, was approved by the ATC. The lead agency is the DILG. However, Mr. Chairman, this is an ATC resolution. If I may recommend in the law that the law should include the Department of Education be mandated to, yes, sir. Kasama na naman yata yun, sir. Should be required to provide education. We believe, Mr. Chairman, that to prevent them from being radicalized, the best is to educate them about extremism. It would immunize them or vaccinate them from the influence of extremism. And the sooner that the law will be passed, Mr. Chairman, the sooner the program can be started.
How about DOLE? You suggested that DOLE be also included. So anong DepEd I can understand, DICT I can understand. Yung DOLE.
Mr. Chair, we have DOLE has been included because we consider the OFWs as one of the vulnerable sectors
Recruitment.
for recruitment.
But Mr. Chair, the participation of the DepEd and possibly DOLE with respect to detection and prevention. My question earlier is, well, I noticed that my son has already been radicalized on the intervention aspect to de-radicalize. So I think DepEd has nothing to do with that. I think just like rehabilitation of drug abuser, so it's either should be done by a psychologist or I do not know what expertise who can do that.
Yeah. So who will put in charge of deradicalizing a recruited homegrown terrorist? Na sinabi nga ni Judge, nando na, nasa poder na ng magulang. Pero it's not enough because as we experienced during our last hearing do sa mga missing minors, hawak na ng magulang, nagpipipiglas pa, gusto pang bumalik do sa kabataan o sa anak bayan or kabataan party list and rejoin. And these are minors, 16, 17 years old. So yung tanong ni Judge, who will be in charge of deradicalization?
May I, sir?
Sige, Alex.
Based on our studies and observation abroad, other countries who are implementing the radicalization program, it is not a single entity that can conduct this. Like, for instance, in Singapore, it's the family and the government institution and some NGOs funded by foreign or by the government who conduct the radicalization. Yeah, and still it is not a 100% batting average for them. However, Mr. Chairman, based on the experience of the security sector in dealing with radicalized communist terrorists, what we observe is that the best people who can help de-radicalize them are also the former rebels themselves, because they can empathize with the radicalized youth, and they can present their testimony of how they were deceived and how they were radicalized, and therefore this enlightens the radicalized youth. Actually, it's already being done by the DILG, by the AFP, and others, members of the National Task Force, jointly in dealing with former rebels. There is a program to indoctrinate them. And yung question ni Judge, ang kailangan na lang, Mr. Chairman, is if they refuse, there has to be a mechanism to put them in a controlled environment and be given the re-education to enlighten them.
The chair recognizes the presence of the Honorable Marcos. She's also one of the authors, Senate Bill 630, and in her version, meron siyang na-introduce na new feature, which I already mentioned to her. I would subscribe to support. Kindly articulate some more.
Yes, thank you very much to our good Chairman Ping Lacson, who also attended my meeting to provide quorum. Thank you. It's a busy morning for all of us. Thank you to the Cabinet Secretaries and the rest of the officials who are here. I in fact, filed an anti-terrorism bill in as much as I chaired this effort in the House long ago in Congress. It seems that there are a number of venues that are still not included, and clearly technology and media seem to be part of that. And we're grateful that Senator Honasan is here with the DICT and the rest involved in cyber terror and cybercrime. Kasi kulang na kulang ang budget dyan, building lang yata ang naibigay. And in addition, there are other venues and types of indoctrination and participation that we had not anticipated in the past. And this involved, naturally, the madrasa schools and other informal groupings. Furthermore, I think that we did not anticipate as well our early inclusion in the list for chemical, biological, and nuclear warfare, which was obviously not prophesied by the bill long ago. Finally, the Philippines' compliance and cooperation in so many international agreements needs to be reiterated in a municipal law. And we tried as best as we could to include those with a blanket provision at the end that all other international intelligence and other cooperation should be encouraged. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Marcos. Anyone else? Yes, SND.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we should treat terrorism as a special crime, way above the ordinary crimes that we are dealing with. A while ago, Attorney Pimentel Gana mentioned about a balance between security and human rights. I would suggest that if we are made that choice, if we are given that choice, I think we will tilt it toward security because of the dire consequences to our community.
Because you're dealing with the rights of humanity, after all, di ba? Against human rights or individual human rights. Yes, Attorney Gana.
Well, I don't think it's the proper forum to debate that. But at least what we should do is to ensure that there are safeguards indeed in the law, that there will be no abuses that would result from such security protection. Thank you.
Our basic reference should be the Constitution, di ba? Mayroong mga guaranteed rights under the Constitution, and we should not go below the threshold of those rights. But yeah, coming from the law enforcement sector myself, I'm inclined to support the statement of SND Lorenzana.
Chair, I would like also to
Sa akin lang, pwedeng isagad natin, pero wag tayong bababa pa doon sa nasa guaranteed sa Constitution.
Naku ho, oh,
Ay.
kailangan ho i-insert yan. Pero I would like to commend Senator Marcos in what she said that this should actually be the international agreements and conventions that we did sign should at least be supported in our domestic laws.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. With all due respect, the Bill of Rights covers political rights. There are other rights that need to be covered over and above those in the Constitution. The freedom from fear, for example, and the need for peace and security. The freedom from hunger, freedom from ignorance. Hindi po linalagay dyan, pero may economic rights rin naman.
Thank you, Madam Senator, because we have indeed economic, social, and cultural rights.
Senator Nasan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, as a partial response to the point raised by Judge Reyes, actually ho, Mr. Chairman, ang frontline organization talaga natin dito is the local government unit. So it's ably led by Secretary Anyo. No? But our most fundamental, basic, and strongest political, social, and economic unit is the family. So the family will find its way into the schools. Judge, if I may address, Mr. Chairman, whether it's the drug problem or radicalization, the usual response in most of the debates we have, I personally attended, is good parenthood. So one approach, Mr. Chairman, is connectivity. In fact, this is incorporated in the marching orders of the President to almost every line department. Connect government to other governments, domestic or global, connect government to business, connect government to the citizens and everybody to each other. If we are able to do this with instruments like a mechanism which is familiar to the chairman, the national ID system, maybe we are on our way towards seamlessly connecting everybody para we can monitor each other. Ang ayaw lang nun, yung criminal at saka yung terrorist. Katulad nung the resistance we met with the national ID system. And I think we are equipped to do that. That's the reason for convergence, private-public partnership. And maybe this is one approach we can, which we may suggest to the committee to take as we put our heads together and come up with a more responsive law. Salamat po.
Incidentally, it will start its full implementation next January, di ba? January next year. And the timeline, I think, is 3 years before 2022. All of 110 or 115 million Filipinos will be covered. Because during the debates, we learned from PSA, the measure of the success of the national ID system is the number of Filipinos to be covered. Kasi bahala na silang mag-parse later on, mag-filter, but yung initial measure nila is for all Filipinos to be covered by the national ID system.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add
Sige,
very
please.
quickly. Para hong national security ito. I think ang tendency of national security, DND lang yan, or DILG. Hindi ho. National security is everybody's business. Counterterrorism is also everybody's business. Thank you po.
Yeah, DND, Yusek.
Sir, with the indulgence, sir. Sir, there is a recommendation, sir, that we submit that whenever this is special case, for example, operations in Marawi or in Zamboanga, the detentions of those suspects should not only include or should not only be limited to 30 days or so, or 14 days. They may be detained during the durations of the operations. There are some people who can be help the military or security sectors, or for this in these particular samples. So there are special situations that we can detain. If
Yeah,
that will be included.
your concern will be addressed. Meron naman tinatawag na judicial authorization. So they will be held without bail. So you can continue naman, di ba? Of course, without encroaching on the subjudice rule of the court, you can still conduct further intelligence gathering without jeopardizing yung case, di ba? Na hawak na ng court. May mga mechanism naman yan, Judge, di ba? Basta as long as there's judicial authorization granted by the court, I don't see any problem. But ang pag-uusapan lang natin as far as itong measure is concerned, yung reglementary period. Kasi dito yung critical eh. If you can hold him or the terrorist suspects for only 36 hours or 3 days, mukhang bitin na bitin. That's why we're trying to, or we will try our best to convince our colleagues, in both houses to accede or allow us to extend the reglementary period to 14 days, extendable further to another 15 days. Yun ang nasa bill natin. Yes, ATC.
Mr. Chair, regarding the CBRN mentioned by Senator Marcos, I would like to apprise the committee that along with the NAP-PCBE, NAP-CBRN has already been approved during the last meeting of the Anti-Terrorism Council. So we are in the process of actually formulating the implementing plan of that NAP-CBRN. What we need actually is a strong law supporting our effort to deprive the non-state actors of access to weapons of mass destruction. We filed a bill, a Chemical Weapons Convention bill during the last Congress. And I think also a bill on Biological Weapons Convention was also filed. So we are requesting the lawmakers to support this because while this will be very beneficial to our country to support our CBRN effort, it will also help us comply with the requirement as to compliance with our international obligation. We are one of the 12 countries in this region which has not complied yet with the enactment of a Chemical Weapons Convention law. So we need that. In fact, we have been revising the draft of the Chemical Weapons Convention bill. And so we will be submitting that, of course, after the approval by the Anti-Terrorism Council of its content. So we are actually telling that to you in advance so that we will be able to facilitate the approval of that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if the Executive Director would allow, please review Section 13 in my draft. Baka sakali yung CBRN madagdagan at ma-enhance po ninyo. Nandun yung iba't ibang modes of manufacture, acquire, possess, develop, transport, transfer, and reuse nuclear and radiological, chemical, or biological methods. At 10 years to and 1 day to 12 years po ang imprisonment. Kung gusto ninyo, pag-usapan po natin pag nagbuo ng TWG ang ating chairman.
Yes, ma'am. We will study this and make our recommendation, submit to you our recommendations.
Yes, Senator De La Rosa, recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to, for the record, I would like to manifest my support to that extension of the reglementary period, even up to 1 month. Because per experience, Mr. Chairman, when I was the city director of Davao City, may nahuli kami na foreign, mayroon kami na neutralized na suicide bomber. Then, one of his visitors sa kanyang hotel room was foreigner looking, parang Middle Eastern. Paglabas sa room, Mr. Chairman, sinabihan ako ng military intelligence, sir, hulihin natin ito dahil foreign terrorist ito. Hinuli namin. Paghuli namin, dinitain ko. Then, because of the reglementary period, I told the military intelligence, please help me, provide me with the sufficient evidence to indict this foreign terrorist. Sabi pa nga niya sa akin na, sir, foreigners nga yan, sir. Punta tayo sa BI, Bataga Bureau of Immigration. Sabi ko, foreigner ka ba? Sabi, sir, Pilipino ako. Are you sure? Sir, mandito meron akong passport, kompleto. Nang, sabi ko, kantahin mo nga yung Bayang Magiliw, kung Pilipino ka. So kumanta siya sir, hanggang natapos na yung Lupang Hinirang. So sabi ko sa military intelligence, wala tayo, reglementary period fast approaching, release natin ito. Wala tayong magawa sir, so release ko. After 1 year, bumalik sa akin yung military intelligence. Sabi, sir, tingnan mo yung nirelease mo. Kung hindi mo ito nirelease, hindi sana ito makapagpugot ng ulo ng mga Westerners doon sa Syria. Pinakita sa akin sir yung YouTube. Sabi ko, yan yung tao na yan. Hinuli natin. Ginugulgulan ng liig yung German journalist ba yun doon sa Syria. Sabi ko, sana ma-revisit itong reglementary period. Lalong-lalo for terrorist offenses. Kaya kahit na, kung binigyan kami doon na kahit na 1 week lang sir, I am sure we can come up with solid evidence against him. Pero wala. 36 hours lang. After 36 hours, release ko. Otherwise, liable kami for arbitrary detention. So, the-release. Kung wala sana, sabi ng military intelligence sa akin, sir, tingnan mo, ito yung mukha na hinuli natin, na nirelease mo. Ilang foreigners ng pinugutan ng liig doon sa Syria. Doon sa video talaga ng YouTube, sir. Kitang-kita ko, pati yung kanyang pag-alawak bar, yun talaga yung boses na yun na nandun sa opisina ko eh. Sabi ko, sayang, we could have saved more lives kung itong batas na ito naayos natin noon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator De La Rosa, for sharing. This is actually one actual experience that could help enhance or enrich this measure on anti-terrorism. Kasi ito yung nangyayari sa ground talaga na hindi natin na-appreciate masyado. So, along that line, maybe we can put up something to address that particular concern, that particular experience.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to mention also na may dinagdag po ako ng ganon, yung Section 15 po sa akin, may glorification of terrorism and the role of the media. I think yung glorification of extreme violence, yung pugutan ng ulo sa YouTube, at yung iba pang ginagamit nilang propaganda, pati yung role ng media, naalala naman po natin yung Luneta Siege, talagang kinakailangan siguro may say din ang ating mga law enforcers.
Senator De La Rosa.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to go back to yung deradicalization ng mga, lalong-lalo na yung mga convicted natin ng mga terrorist. Kasi may experience sa Bucor, when I was Director General ng Bucor, lahat kasi yung mga hardcore terrorist at saka yung mga big-time drug lords, pinaghalo-halo doon sa Building 14, sa super maximum facility ng Bucor. Well, nandun sila, ito, ma-share ko na lang, kinausap ko yung terorista, yung convicted terorista. Sabi ko, ang problema natin ngayon talaga dito, yung patuloy na transaksyon ng droga nito, mga drug lord na kasama mo dito sa loob. Pwede bang i-radicalize mo sila para mawala yung utak nila sa droga, mapunta sila sa terrorism? So, sabi sa akin ng, sir, pareho tayo Pilipino, ito, mga Chinese man ito. Mas loyal ako sa'yo dahil pareho tayo Pilipino, tulungan kita. I-radicalize ko ito. Sabi ko, sige nga, tingnan natin para mawala yung orientation na sa droga. After 1 month, binaligan ko, sir. Kumusta, Commander? What happened to your deradicalization and radicalization efforts dito sa mga Chinese drug lords na ito? Sabi sa akin nung terorista, sir, mukhang ako man ang nasyabulize nila. Mas masarap na ang buhay pala ng drug lord kaysa ng terorista. So, ito, nakakatawa. But my point is, sana yung ating magiging deradicalization efforts dito, kung sino man mag-handle ito, DSWD man, or AAP or PNP, sana idagdag talaga dito. Hindi lang tayo, para hindi tayo lalabas na puro pambubula sa ating deradicalization efforts. Lagyan natin talaga ng economic factors Malaking bagay yung economic factors, lalong na bigyan mo ng livelihood itong mga tao na ito dahil mga nag-rebuild dito dahil sa hirap eh. Kung mabigyan ito ng economic factors, economic considerations, yung ating programa, incorporate doon, mas maging epektibo. Kasi nga, sabi ko, na hardcore ito na terorista. Gusto ko ma-convert yung mga drug lord maging terorista, pero baligtad. Siya ang nagiging drug lord. Masarap pala mag-drug lord, sir. So, economics pa rin ang isang buwan dyan, factor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Kung pinakinggan mo yung advice ni Senator Hunasan noon na faulty wiring, wala kang problemang ganyan.
Mr. Chairman.
Secretary Anyo.
Sir, I support the statement of Senator De La Rosa, not only in Bucor but also in BJMP. Yes, all our terrorist suspects are housed in special intensive care area. But they are all together, and it turned out to be a university for terrorists. So instead of de-radicalization, I think they're becoming more radical, and they're planning and doing terroristic plans as well as from the outside. So I'm glad that in the law there is a provision for the special detention area. Dito mas lalong magagawa natin yung de-radicalization if they are segregated and the families are given access for them separately. So, and involving a whole of nation approach. So, that would actually address de-radicalization.
That is one feature that we will include. Yung sa Australia, tawag nila Supermax. Super Maximum Detention Center. Talagang isolated.
Mr. Chairman.
Judge.
Okay, if we will, on our earlier statement, if we will consider terrorism as a continuing crime, meaning acts committed a year ago, we can effect warrantless arrest and we can brought him for inquest proceeding. I think one possible justification of prolonging the period of detention is because it will be hard to gather evidence of a crime committed a year ago. So I think that can be a possible justification because unlike in a case that has been just committed and brought to inquest proceedings. So that's one. On the earlier statement of Secretary Honasan, I subscribe to his statement because in the seminar which I attended, we are all in one agreement that with respect to the detection and prevention, the family, the community, and the local government unit plays a major role on that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Judge.
Mr. Chair, just Judge Reyes brought up a very important matter a while ago. Yung bang how to de-radicalize yung mga these kids or people who have not yet gone to yung next stage of going into the terrorist group. I think we can take a lesson from the Singapore experience, wherein they put up this committee on religious harmony and understanding. And I was told by the Home Minister, he said that if they found somebody who is being radicalized through internet or everything, kukunin nila yon tapos i-under nila doon sa body na yon, and then started to slowly radicalize him. Example was that they found out through the internet that one girl, Singapore girl, was communicating with with Syria. And she was actually planning to go there and get married to ISIS fighter so that she will be also a martyr. So kinuha nila yon, nilagay nila under the care of this committee, and she was de-radicalized eventually. Siguro ang gagawin natin is to put up also a similar body in the South, especially because it is there that this radicalization is happening, so that we can focus this attention to this problem of de-radicalization.
Thank you. Again, Secretary Nasan has another suggestion to more effectively de-radicalize terrorists. Disabuse their minds. Hindi totoo yung 72 virgins. Ang totoo raw doon, 72-year-old virgin. Anything more?
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to highlight also the most extensive and lengthy experience in reorientation, debriefing, and de-radicalizing is probably in the United Kingdom. I suggest that the committee also look into the British experience, as their experience with extreme violence and terrorism has been so long-standing.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Judge.
Well, I noticed that one of the controversial provision in the present HSA and in the proposed is the wiretapping. And I think there was additional provision by Senate President on consensual recording. Because in the present setup of the HSA, there was a provision of to wiretap. So only you will need the judicial approval of the Court of Appeals. And I think in the proposed bill, it's now include the judges of the regional trial court. I do not know whether there was already an application before made to wiretap.
ATC, have you applied for wiretapping in relation to the Human Security Act? No, you have not exercised that.
So far, no actual record on that, Mr. Chair, on the application.
The prevailing sentiment, at least in the Senate, is to elevate from RTC going CA. Kasi we learn from the experience of yung sa Leyte na issue ng search warrant. Yung kay Superintendent Marcos. Tapos mali yung kaya na-sanction yung judge. So at least from the point of view of Senator Drilon, sabi niya, I won't be a problem in the passage of this measure, but ito lang gusto ko i-emphasize, baka pwedeng sa CA natin, sa Court of Appeals natin, ibigay yung authority to issue judicial authorization instead of the RTC. He's just worried na yung issue ng jurisdiction would be abused.
So, tsaka po, Mr. Chairman, under the present HSA, so since we have predicate crimes, and then yun lang, yung merong acts to constitute act of terrorism. So, dapat, when you apply for to wiretap, so you have to establish probable cause doon sa predicate crime. And then, yun nga, there are acts to constitute.
And it becomes very tedious. That's the reason why we are already excluding predicate crimes in the amendment that we are introducing. Wala na pong predicate crimes. A terrorist act is a terrorist act.
So, pagka na-amend po ito, wala ng predicate crime, so the applicant should establish probable cause on the commission of this terrorist act.
That is correct, Judge. Yun po.
Ito naman po, how if in the process of wiretapping, nalaman mo rin na mayroong commission of a predicate crime?
That's under study po, because yung sa amendment namin sa 4200, this has become an issue. My contention is that parang pwedeng apply yung plain view principle. In the United States, meron silang tinatawag yatang plain hearing. Kasi it's as if a crime is being committed right in your presence and you're not doing anything about it. So ito yung pinag-uusapan pa namin dito with our colleagues na kung pwedeng i-apply yung plain view principle pagdating sa wiretapping. Because, for example, we have a judicial authorization to wiretap based on our application do sa violation ng Anti-Terrorism Act. But then, in the course of the conversation, we discovered na may pinag-uusapan silang ibang crime na kinumit nila. Since we are covered by a judicial authorization, can we use that piece of information as evidence? That is an issue that we have to resolve with our colleagues here in the Senate. Ang sabi nila, hindi raw pwede. My contention is, pwede, because it's akin to being present during the commission of a crime, actual commission. So, nandyan na yung information, binolunteer na nga noong yung nag-engage sa conversation, and yet, we will not use that piece of evidence, which meron naman tayong hawak na pinanghawakang court order. Bakit hindi natin pwedeng gamitin yun as evidence? Sayang naman.
Nga po,
thoughts, Judge.
meron po tayong proposed violation of yung material support o financial support. Paano nga po kung narinig niya, o i-deliver mo yung shabu na yun and in collection, bigyan mo sa terrorist. Can you also charge him for or transporting or selling
Yes, or
under the
violation
plain
of
here doctrine?
the comprehensive
Or public corruption po?
Yeah, or public corruption. Tama po, Judge. So, this will be a long discussion during the plenary debates, but, you know, I subscribe to the idea na ba't hindi mo pwedeng gamitin yun? Nandiyan na nga yung crime being committed right in your presence, or at least narinig mo, and you have naman the judicial authorization to hear those pieces of evidence, whatever it is, outside of the commission of a terrorist act. Diba? Kasi nag-usap na sila na nag-deliver ng shabu, pwede mo na siyang i-charge doon ng violation ng Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act. Or nag-uusap sila na may ni-rape siya, in-identify naman properly sino yung victim. Bakit hindi mo siya pwedeng kasuhan for the crime of rape, considering na sa kanya naman ang galing information? And of course, this should be supported by other circumstantial evidence, not just baka mamaya nagyayabang lang. Sabihin niya sa depensa sa court, no, nagyayabang lang naman ako, hindi naman totoo. But if it is supported by other independent evidence, I think you should be able to use that piece of evidence that you gather from the from wiretapping sa prosecution. Di po ba, Judge?
O if we will allow yung same principle of plain view doctrine sa plain here doctrine, so that it will be allowed. Yun naman po, Mr. Chairman, sa consensual recording as proposed by the Senate President. So, iba naman po yan sa anti-wiretapping. So,
alam niyo po, Judge, sa Amerika, hindi lang consensual. One-party consent. Ayun, hindi na obra yun dito. Tiyak na magagalit sa atin ng Commission on Human Rights. One-party consent is being allowed in the United States. Di ba? Ganyan ang pag-usapan natin last time during our hearings. One-party consent is already sufficient to wiretap. I don't think it will be adopted here.
But
Yung consensual.
Pero yung po yatang court ngayon is already admitting the CCTV footages with video and audio.
Iba naman po yun. Yun yung Ople versus Torres yata yun. Yung parang reasonable expectation of privacy test. No? There are two tests involved. Yun yung the individual has already expected that he would lose his privacy in a public place, for example. And that society has also considered that that individual is supposed to lose his privacy. So it has to pass the two reasonable expectation of privacy test. Meron pong jurisprudence.
Pero Mr. Chairman, there is this argument that when you converse with somebody, you already waive your right to privacy. In fact, we have already consensual recording. Whenever you talk with somebody, the audio is the ears, the video is the eyes, the mind is the recorder. Only this is consensual recording using gadget. That's why the problem. And then if you converse with somebody, you cannot prevent him to testify on what you converse. The problem is if he testify, and I will testify, we are prone to tell a lie. But if it's a gadget, nobody can tell a lie. And I was so concerned about this because in the case which I decided, only if the Army Sergeant was able to use consensual recording and he was able to record the several meetings he had with this rebel, it's very easy for me, for the prosecution to prosecute and for the judge to decide based on this recorded conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Judge. As long as the other guy or the other party is informed that their conversation is being recorded. Pero kung hindi, kung surreptitiously ni-record, I don't think it will pass the consensual consent principle. Di ba ba, Judge? Halimbawa, kausap ko si Senator Bato, gusto ko lang malaman ilan ang girlfriend niya. Pagkatapos, nagtago lang ako rito ng cellphone na naka-on, yung mic.
Nireport po sa asawa ko, sir.
Nireport ko sa misis niya. Pwede niya akong habulin ng violation ng RA 4200 ng wiretapping because I wiretapped him without his knowledge.
I understand in the US it is allowed, Your Honor.
In the US, one-party consent nga eh. Yung FBI, tama, always.
The Chairman.
Sige,
Chairman, just like to express our concern about the wiretapping procedures for application. The Chair mentioned that it would be elevated to the Court of Appeals, to the CA. Honestly, Mr. Chair, the tedious process elevating it to the CA may just be a stumbling block for the effective conduct of surveillance. We recommended earlier that for purpose of surveillance pa lang muna, Mr. Chair, before evidence. Yeah, before present, not for evidence, but for surveillance, because the idea is to prevent.
When you secure a court warrant, a court order, you're gathering evidence,
Yes, sir.
not just information.
Yes, sir. That's another
Kasi
thing.
when if you're covered with a judicial authorization, by all means, evidence yung magagather
Yes, sir.
mong information.
Yes, sir. Ang point ko, sir, is the intelligence community needs to conduct surveillance on many targets to be able to prevent a crime.
You're doing it anyway without court order.
Yes, sir. We do not want to violate
And-
we do not want to be violating nandito yung human rights, Mr. Chairman. I refuse to acknowledge. But ang akin, Mr. Chair, is we recommended earlier that probably just for giving the semblance of due process, that for instance, the ATC be given the authority to allow certain agencies to conduct surveillance on particular targets. The ATC is
At
composed
the ATC level?
Yes, sir.
I don't think so.
Whatever.
Kasi court yan jurisdiction ng court yan, because that's a judicial authorization. And an executive, a unit under the executive branch cannot exercise the authority that's given to the court.
Kasi sir, number one is secrecy.
No, Alex, take life na lang kayo.
Alam naman sir ni Senator Bato yan sir. Pero, yes sir. Yes sir.
Sabi mo nga, information gathering lang naman di ba?
Yes, sir.
Surveillance lang. But kung gusto nyong i-extend hanggang sa gamiting ebidensya, mas maganda na rin yung talaga may judicial authorization. Pero for surveillance purposes, just take life.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Secretary.
can the law provides provision not just for CA but another special court? So may choice po. You can go to the CA or the special court to be constituted.
Yeah, well taken. Thank you. Thank you for the suggestion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
meron
Gwen.
lang akong question kasi the way the discussions are going on, parang the law really protects and gives more power to the ATC to come up with the prospect of really zooming in on who the terrorists are. So I was just asking, in relation to the detention period, the extension, could it be possible if the building of the case can actually be done before the arrest? So, I'm not a law enforcer, so I don't really know what's happening on the ground. But if we give powers to the ATC to really be able to build the case, is it possible?
Yeah, it's possible, but it's a case-to-case basis, on a case-to-case basis, because there are some cases na magbi-build up ka pa lang ng kaso, pero naandyan na yung suspect na aresto mo na. Say, for example, an actual bombing, merong na-aresto. They need to hold that person or persons in custody for an extended period, not just 36 hours, because they need to follow up more leads. Yun ang point. But yung kaso na they have all the time to gather intelligence, yun yung pwede mag-apply na sa build-up ng kaso, doon na sila gagather ng lahat ng ebidensya that they need. So, I think we've covered
I think, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
huli na lang po.
Judge. We're learning
yun
from
po
you,
yung-
by the way, and thank you very much.
Opo po, yung pong issue of hierarchy of rights, security and human rights. I think we should also, in the proposed amendment, it should also be guided with the provision of the international humanitarian law of the IHL. Actually, I also made the first conviction on that. It's a good thing that it was the rebel who committed violation of the IHL, not the military.
Thank you, Judge. Well taken. And I would suggest that ATC consolidate all these suggestions when you submit your position paper, no, para ma-incorporate natin, because I want this measure to be the first to be tackled on the floor para maipasa natin. And I would like to ask you if your commitment to recommend to the President the immediate lifting of martial law once this measure is passed. Di ba? You made that commitment last year. And this is much, 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 much stronger than the martial law that you are using now, di ba? Which, of course, we all know is a toothless martial law. Panakot lang naman kayo doon sa Mindanao. Saywar lang. Wala naman din kayo magawa. Nandun pa rin yung 36 hours. Nandun pa rin yung warrantless arrest provision na actually being committed, has in fact been committed, and so forth and so on, di ba? Wala naman talagang panakot lang ginagawa nyo doon. Niloloko nyo lang yung mga terrorist doon. Sige, Ronald.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
request
yes,
permission to make a statement. Actually, the DIPNP has adopted the Senator's Lacson version as a working draft. That's Mr. Chair. I suggest also that there should be we should enhance multi-corporation or bilateral cooperation between countries to fast-track or speed up the collection of information with regards to reported foreign fighters who are here in the Philippines and those who are arrested, sir, not in order not to unnecessarily prolong also the arrested person, the detention. So with that, to sustain that program, Mr. Chair, we need to have an enough or sufficient fund for that. If this anti-terrorism law, to strengthen this weakest terrorism law in the
Don't worry,
worldwide.
dala-dalawa na kami ngayon ni Senator Bato na magdagdag ng budget nyo, pati doon sa AFP. Lagi na lang namin kayo dinadagdagan taon-taon. So, that's it. So, in the meantime, we'll just suspend the hearing. But if we want call anymore for any public hearing to tackle this measure, then we'll just submit the committee report based on your further submission. So, Mr. Thank you very much. Thank you to all.